Yeah, but you could have Sundays every day of the week.
Right when the drum came in, Tom never failed. But bum bum.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Tuesday, where my beautiful, wonderful co-host Tara and I talk about all things to do with relationships and communication. And today we are going to talk about how do we change our patterns when we're stressed. Now, we often talk about how do we become our best self and how do we change habits and things like that. But the reality is that in a vacuum, it could be fairly easy. But when we're stressed with work, or not with work and life, with whatever, when the stressors of life come in, how do we do it then, Tara? This is a question I'm really interested in because I've had some recent experiences with this, but I want to let you kick us off and then let's dive into the conversation.
Yeah, I have really been rather intrigued by stress for quite some time, because whenever we have any negative emotions, all the research that I can do, it all tracks back to, in the world of neuroscience, to stress. Like, we're producing the same type of hormones, it's the same reaction. So I've dug deeper into stress, and I would like for us to define exactly what we're talking about before. Usually I'll start us off with a story. So, and I'm going to do that. I pulled a stressful moment from my life that I'll never forget. But before I do that, I think the very best way that I've heard stress defined, and I do want to dive into this after we share a little bit, is stress is when we don't have the resources to cope with the circumstances of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, even that single definition to me is a little bit empowering.
Yeah.
What I hope we'll do today is uncover some more really tactical information around stress, how it shows up in our lives, and how we can respond to it differently. And I think the first time I really noticed how stress was coming up in a negative way in my life was when I was a young mother. And this was before my daughter got encephalitis, 3 young kids, running a business. I was just getting it off the ground, life, nothing extraordinary, but just busy and a lot of stress and, limited funds. And it's still hard for me to say this, and I can't even imagine today behaving like this, but I was a thrower.
I remember that.
What I mean by that is when I got mad, I would throw things, never at anyone, but like when the house was, I can't believe I'm cleaning this mess up again, I would throw a shoe or whatever. And one morning I came downstairs, or evening, I don't know. I cannot believe the house was just clean, this and this and this. And I'm coming down the hallway and I see a lip gloss that belonged to one of my daughters, and I picked it up off the front hall table and I go to throw it at the coat closet. Right as I throw it, between myself and the coat closet is a doorway to the kitchen. Right as I go to throw it, because I'm ranting like a loon, sweet Caroline sticks her head out to look at her crazy mother, and she was probably 1.5 feet from me, and I threw that lip gloss hard and it smacked her on the cheek, and she dropped to the ground. And that was my very last time I ever threw something. The last time. It never, ever happened again. Now, I didn't get a handle on the screaming for a lot of years, but that one experience forced me to take a look at stress. And quite honestly, and then with Caroline's encephalitis and starting to study the brain, I realized how much power we really do have over our stress. And quite honestly and sadly, I see so many folks trying to deal with stress with more negative intake. For example, alcohol. Like, I'm stressed, I need a drink. I'm stressed, I need to smoke, which is the worst. Caffeine, terrible. Sugar, terrible. All those things are elevating our stress response. So I know I'm not quite anywhere close to answering the question. I definitely want to hear about your experience, but I just wanted to share that because I think it's a clear visual, at least for me, is the power of stress and the fact that we truly do have some power over it. Because as I said, that was one of my patterns, throwing things when I got mad. And I cannot imagine doing that today. So before we dive into maybe some solutions and a little bit of science, I want to hear from what's bubbling up for you, Kathryn, around stress at this season in your life and how you do control your patterns, or can you?
Well, I think that's the question. That's what's so interesting to me, because I love the definition that you described, because to me, yes, we're not resourced enough to handle the circumstances in our life. And so we go to like our default patterns. That's what I do. Like for me, I'm not a thrower, and I cannot imagine you being that way or doing that. Just like you said, I'm like, wow. But for me, what I do, it's a little bit more, it feels more insidious. So if I get really stressed and this is embarrassing for me to say, but I get righteous. I get passive aggressive, and so I get like, for the people that I love, the most, it could be my kids, it could be my relationship, it could be my parents, but I'll be rude to them. I'll try and get them off the phone. Everything's going like this. It's like a default pattern. And so I notice that I do that. And like I recently said that I've gotten a new role, and like it has been very stressful to just shift into that and to have more work and more responsibility in the kids, et cetera. And I've noticed that I've done that lately, that I'll get really stressed. I have no capacity. Like I don't have any resources, right? And I don't feel like I have time to go get more resources, like to fill my bucket. So it comes out in these sideways, noticing like with my son, I said something, and it's like, I said something the other night. I can't remember the situation, but it was like, well, if you would clean it up, then it wouldn't be this way, that type of thing, and he's looking at me like, where did that come? This is so unusual. Where did that come from? So my point about saying that is that we all have these default patterns that we go towards when we are stressed, when we don't have the resources to deal with what we have in front of us. And I don't know that I know the way to change the pattern, but for everyone, I know for me, because Tom and I just had a conversation about this, is being vulnerable, which is the last thing I want to do in that moment, is the antidote. The closest thing I have to an antidote for me to my default patterns of passive aggressive, being manipulative, being righteous, being, aggressive, or whatever it is. It's like, if I can just stop and say, I'm overcapacity. I don't know how to do what I'm doing right now, or I feel really scared, or I feel really stressed. I don't think I can do this. Like that starts to open up a conversation, and I can already feel myself, because I can feel myself get amped talking about it. And I can feel myself relax a little bit when I say that.
Just now?
Yeah.
So say a little bit more, because I think that you're really onto something, and it wildly aligns with the science that I study. So you're in a stress mode. You're not treating people the way that you truly want to. And when you can find the gumption, the strength to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Like to admit, because what happens for me, I don't know if this is the same for everybody. I'm holding all these balls. I'm trying to juggle them. It feels like the only thing I can do is keep these balls in the air and keep going. So it's more stress. And now there's stress on me. Not, you know what I mean? It's like stress upon stress upon stress. If I can in that moment stop and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared I'm going to fail. First of all, what happens is it's exactly your TED Talk. It opens up that relationship pathway. Because I can tell you there isn't much of a relationship pathway when I'm being righteous and passive aggressive. That may come as a shock to you. But if I can just say, I don't know what's going on, and whatever the situation is, I don't feel like I have to hold the balls. So that level of stress starts to come down. I'm relating with another person. I have the ability to get it wrong. Perfectionism is a thing for me. So just admitting that I don't have to get it right feels like a relief. So I don't know how that lines up with the science, but like I said, I've been having this conversation because of recent stressors, and noticing that some of my relationships are really struggling, and like, that's not the outcome I want. And so being more vulnerable can start to bridge that gap. So tell me what's going on in my brain, I guess, if it does align with the science,
So much so. And, in the beginning, when you were talking about this, you're like, I don't know that I know how to answer this question. I think you very, very beautifully did answer it. In the brain, there are 3 really different levels of stress. And one is, and I'll just use layman terms, one's good stress. It's actually called eustress, EU stress. And it's when you're like, when I did the TED Talk, like that was stressful, but I was excited. That was super positive. And that causes particular hormones to be produced that are really good for the immune system, good for the metabolism, good for the cardiovascular. I could go on and on about how positive that is for you. So let's put that one aside for a minute. The middle level of stress is what scientists refer to as tolerable stress. Okay. And this is what I think you're leaving toxic stress and you're going, which is the worst, and you're going into tolerable stress when you respond with vulnerability versus trying to be in control and tell people what to do. And what a beautifully vulnerable word for you to use is righteous. I mean, that's damn hard to say.
It is very hard to say.
Well,
very hard.
But how self-aware and beautiful that you state that, and then you realize, so does this align with the science? Like, boom, it's just like the big lesson, because toxic stress is when and I could share, people are like, oh, stress is bad for your body. It physically is bad for your health in so many ways. But when you're in this tolerable stress, that's an opportunity for your brain to create new neural pathways, to continue to grow, and to be able to, what they call is, lean into our ability to have neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. And so your brain is in distress, but you have the skills and the health to cope with it, even though it's difficult. And one of the best ways to cope with tolerable stress is to lean on other people. And that's something that I had to learn, like accepting help. Some similar to what you're sharing, but different in that I don't think I came across when I'm in a stress mode. I don't think I come across necessarily as you do, but I'm in this place where I don't want to accept help. Like I just think I've got it. I'll do it. And I just kind of like fold into myself. That is the worst thing that we could do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true what you're saying about the body and health and how stress impacts that. For a long time, I've thought, I almost don't care what I do to relieve stress, even if at times it isn't those good things. And I know they don't help: alcohol, food, binge watching TV, etc. But I don't want to put myself in a consistent state of stress, because I feel like that would, I don't know. I just feel like that would do more damage to my health and it's just an intuitive thing. I mean, I haven't done any research on it. It's like that would do more damage to my health than the other choices that I make. Mm-hmm. However, that's not what I want to do ongoing. And so I think the question is, how do we get resourced when we're not resourced? And so when we're stressed, I know how I have felt over the past few weeks with the increased responsibility and role, et cetera. And it's like, when you're maxed and you don't have any space, how do you go out and get space? It's like, and that's why we do the things like the alcohol and the things like that, because we think it relaxes us and gives us that space when it actually doesn't. But it's like, how do we do it? And here's a place to go, I guess, to your point. That's what I'm saying. It's like, if I can get vulnerable in the moment, it is amazing how differently I feel. All of the to-dos are still there. All of the responsibilities are still there, but I'm not alone.
Right.
And we know that, that's what oxytocin does. I don't know. I just invite us to look at really paying attention to how does our body shift? Because I'm telling you, it is the only reason I'm able to say righteous is because I admitted that to Tom over the weekend, to be quite honest. And so it's not the first time I'm admitting it. It was a very bitter pill to swallow, to realize that this is how I behave and this is how I am. But now it's not so bad, because once we admit it, there's something in there that's like, we don't want to admit fault or failure or anything like that. But once we do that, then it becomes a lot easier. And then it's like, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of what Gio says. He loves being wrong.
Yeah.
I
know.
When he first said that, I was like, I don't. I love being right. Like being right. But then if you just take that away and just admit that you're wrong, then it's like, well, what's possible then? It's like the worst thing just happened. I'm wrong.
I'll tell you what I'm feeling from you sharing this is, and to me, this is part of homeostasis and joy, is a sense of freedom. First of all, you have to become aware of something before you can admit it to others. It's not like you've been running around thinking, I'm righteous. You just have inspected yourself to see, ooh, that's how I show up when I'm not in a good place. And you've referenced several times though, like, so what do we do when we just simply don't have that capacity? The brain is a powerful muscle that needs practice and training.
Mm-hmm.
And something really interesting to me about toxic stress and why certain people, like, I have maybe 3 friends who would have the same problems, but one could handle it like a champion and one would, be a basket case. Why is that? Partly genetics, but the bigger, what research tells us, much more than genetics, is in our developmental years, did we learn to cope with stress? Was there so much trauma that we weren't learning? And I don't want to get too far off track here, but I would be remiss if I didn't say this is what scares me about how we are raising young people today, is we're not giving them opportunities to deal with stress. They just retreat to their devices, their wireless mobile devices, as Dr. Gupta calls them, and they are not building these strengths over time. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to say this because if the last thing I would want any of us to do, and I tend to do it, is to shame ourselves for not being able to deal with stress. This is years and years of how our brain has been developed. And who the hell do we think we are to think we can just like, ooh, now I did it well once, so now it's fixed. We can't. We have to put our brain into training. Our whole body, not just our brain, our entire body.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting you say that, because it reminded me that as I was going through this process, this sort of self-analysis, awareness process, I remember distinctly telling myself, and that's okay. So self grace, it's self-care and grace. And I remember thinking, wow, that felt good, because what happens is it's like, oh my, the feeling of knowing the impact of these things, like, oh gosh, like knowing that you hit your daughter in the side of the face with that lip gloss. Mm-hmm. I can just imagine the feeling of that. Awful. Never want to feel that, right? Yeah, you can feel it now, never want to feel it again.
Yep.
And number one, for me, that's another place to look in terms of how to recover when in times of stress, is to allow those feelings to come through. Because for me, what I'm doing is resisting. I don't want to feel them. I don't want to feel that. I did not want to feel what it felt like to realize, wow, I've been really awful to the people around me that I love. That is an awful feeling. But to feel it metabolizes through our system, and it passes and it goes away, or lessens. It may not go away. So I think that's the other thing, is that yes, the vulnerability, and to allow the feeling to come through, even if it is shame, and just so anyway, so I think the grace is such a huge part of it. And this part gets me really excited. The more grace we have for ourselves, the more grace we naturally have for other people.
So right. Yeah, I need to probably hear that again, because I tend to give grace to other people and not to myself. Like, I expect so much of myself, and that's.
But here, I'm going to assert something. I'm not entirely sure it's 100% true, but I think that we only have the capacity to give grace to the extent that we give it to ourselves. So you may be thinking that you're giving grace to people in certain ways, but my guess would be in other ways, or when something does get triggered, you don't give grace, or you don't have that capacity to give grace, simply because you really aren't truly allowing it.
Yeah. I have to give that some thought, because that obviously doesn't feel good, but I think that you are probably onto something, and maybe it's more patience and acceptance, and that's not the same as grace. I mean, that very well could be.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was like, God, that's so cool. Like, what if that were the formula? What if I really couldn't give grace beyond the capacity to give myself grace? Number one, how much would that change how much grace I give myself? I am curious about that, because I would really want to focus on giving myself grace, because I would want to be able to give it to others.
Right.
And then I guess how would that shift all of my relationships?
Mm-hmm.
That's something I really want to think about because if I deepen my own well and my own self-love, does that mean I'm deepening my love for others? That's a reason to do it. That would be interesting. I kind of want to make it true whether it is or not, just so that I have to do
Well,
that.
you know, I think that, I don't know, I'll tell you what this is making me think about is how much we can change and grow. And the opportunity to do that is when we're in that middle stress zone, like when maybe we're not super desperate. That's when we need to exercise our brain to know what can help us, like to be more vulnerable. Maybe not when you're in a desperate place to be vulnerable, but more often to learn it. About 2 weeks ago, I completely lost my temper with Caroline and I yelled. It was just like I had said something over and over, and I finally said, "I'm not talking about this anymore. It is da 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 da." And then I mentioned it to Mike later. I said, "I'm sure you heard me lose my temper with Caroline." And he said, "Yes." He said, "And you know what? I cannot remember the last time I heard you do that." He said, "Instead of being so mad at yourself, think how long it's been since you did lose your temper." And that made me think, you know what? Damn, he's right.
For once, Mike's right.
Yeah. So it was super helpful. I think Tom wants to chime in here. I would love that.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Tara. Good morning, Kathryn. It's such a good topic. And Kathryn, thinking back to the weekend when we were having our discussions, I didn't know if that was solely to help drive out the Tuesday Daily Huddle conversation or
Oh, it
not.
always
But
is. It's all about the daily huddle.
Do you just feel cheap and used, Tom?
that's all right. I'm not often right, so I just sort of go with the flow. Um, one thing that's really resonating for me here is, Terry, you mentioned this a couple of times, the toxic stress and then the tolerable stress. And what's really resonating for me then is the transitioning off of the toxic. So then you're better able to have the awareness, better able to then choose, to process and then, to shift in a much healthier way. So I guess I wanted to put it back to you all as to, when you're in that toxic stress level, you're really not able to, you know, to choose to move into a healthy way. So, can you offer some more suggestions on moving off the toxic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I think it's what I said. You're right. That's the thing is when you're in, that was what I was saying. If you're in that place, how do you get to space? It's not, you don't literally, I think probably the body makeup won't allow you. The cortisol and all that. But that's what I said, vulnerability is the antidote. Because I think, and the feeling of it, because also the stress that is there is a feeling and the body metabolizes feelings. And so
Yeah,
sometimes,
and yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think I wanted to challenge you a little bit more on that because when you're talking about being vulnerable, then you're in the tolerable stress level. And I guess my question is getting off the toxic. Is it having people that care about you to nudge you? Is it then,
oh,
learning to practice and give yourself a little bit more grace? So then it's easier to,
I see
I,
what you're saying. So you're saying, how
it's
do you
almost like you're,
yeah. Like, how do you get there? Like, how do you
yeah.
decide? Like, if you can't decide to go vulnerable? No, it's a good question. I'll answer it for me, and I'd love to hear what Tara has to say. I have like a toolbox, and it's like right now it feels like I need to call a friend and be really vulnerable or, apologize to someone for something I just did. Another time it's like I really need to sit here, and as counterintuitive as it sounds, I need to feel this level of stress to the max and let it pass through me instead of keep resisting it. At other times, it might go do the bad thing, alcohol or the TV or the whatever, and just let that be it for that night, knowing that I'll start fresh tomorrow. So I can't answer that for every single moment. It's like what works for me now. I do know that really true honesty with myself is the key.
Well, I think what I hear you saying is even when you're in the toxic stress level, you still have an ability to choose to act in a certain way, and I think that's really healthy then to recognize.
Yeah, I would say that's a definite. We do have choices even in that moment, as hard as it may be. Tara, what do you think?
Um, sometimes I like a little bit more of like tactical help, like, and that's where I'll tend to lean on the science. But if you find yourself in this toxic stress, where it becomes damaging to your body is when it's chronic, and there's so much proof to that. So if you don't have the resources to cope with stress in a moment, if we can, the very best thing to do is to walk away for a moment. Not walk toward a screen, not walk towards caffeine, not walk towards sugar, because we have something in our body called glucocorticoids, and that's affecting our sugars, fats, and our inflammation really, really bad. So if we go to a screen or anything toxic, it's really elevating that. We think it's a break, and it's a little bit of break from the stress. So my recommendation is just step away if you can into nature. Then assess if this continues to happen. My go-to is what can I eliminate? Look at my priorities and my values, and what can I eliminate from my plate to help me to manage my priorities and not try to say yes to everybody. So I know I'm kind of a little bit in the tactical, but sometimes we need those just really tactical things to assess. So
I love that. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in. And looks
Yeah,
like
thanks for
Gio
that.
wants to talk about stress. Good morning, Gio.
Good morning. So, this is phenomenal conversation today, given the high level of stress I find myself today. We have a conference in our business, and as a team, we put a conference together every year. We have about 400 people coming from different places to this conference this Friday. This Friday. And so it's a big deal for our mission, and it's a big deal for our business. And this week, given that is the week where the whole thing is being put together, I have found some really big financial holes around the conference that I didn't see. And so it has caused for myself a high level of stress. And I've been looking for what the source of the stress is. Is it the holes, the financial holes in which I need to find strategies to be able to cover them and make that money back? Or is it my disappointment of myself for not seeing them and being able to prevent them or anticipate them? And I find myself, when the high level of stress is going, I find myself questioning the entire thing. Like, what the hell did I do this for? What the hell is this for? What the fuck? And so I'm in that place. So what I am getting from this conversation is there's an opportunity for me to step back, just like chill out, go to nature and step back. And my brain is telling me, you don't have time to go to nature. What the hell? No, you get that. You got to put it together, reinvent yourself real quickly, and say something cool. Say something amazing, say something cool, and keep going. But I'm looking for, and maybe this is a question, or maybe I'm just making a comment, I'm looking for the kind of insight that allows me to nurture the stress, if you will, while I am performing. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to say.
So, Gio, I'm going to push back on you a little bit because when we're in this super stress mode, and if someone was like, go take a walk in nature, I'd be like, screw you. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do. I know that mode, like you're excited, you're stressed, you're kind of worried about all, and your brain is trying to do the organization of this event to a point, and you're trying to be creative and heartfelt. That is so hard on you. You can do it, but it is very hard on you. So what I would say is you do still have the ability to go to nature, to hydrate yourself, to put good things in your mind and body. And you can do it right now when you turn off this computer and close your eyes. that's better than nothing. To close your eyes, imagine yourself in nature and breathe. It will take a step toward the right direction. The big thing that helps me, and I will say this until the end of time, is that stress is an energy and you do have control over it. It is an energy, just like sadness, like we talked about recently, is an energy that you can repurpose. You can't do it in an instant, but with your focus and your ability, you can take that energy and give it back to those people and be the very best GO that you need to be. Then you'll do the postmortem from the event, and the next one will be better. And you'll learn and you'll grow, and they'll continue to get better. But don't tell yourself you don't have time, because I think that you are, I think that you're cutting yourself short. I just don't think you're serving yourself well. Take a moment to find the best GO just by closing your eyes.
Yeah. No, I'm just venting.
Yeah.
I don't know the truth of whether I have time or not. But on top of that, of course I have time for anything. But on top of that, Sorrel is not going to be there on Thursday night or Friday morning. And that is a high level of stress in which I'm putting on him.
Is it Sorrel's fault now?
This is for real too.
It's Sorrel's fault. That's the problem.
Everything circles back to Sorrel.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
We have some beautiful comments in the chat that we've been not good about reading, and now we're over time, but I do want to get better about reading them.
Yeah, no, they are great.
At this point, I want to just say thank you to Florence and to Hala and Cece for your beautiful comments. And thank you all for this beautiful conversation.
And I want to use what Gio said and the laughter that brought to segue into how to close out, because we didn't talk about laughter, but boy, is that an antidote in any way, shape, or form, even if it's laughing at ourselves, our own jokes. So don't forget that one. Throw your head back and laugh. Eat more plants. Get yourself into nature. Your body will thank you. Get your rest. It is also an antidote to stress. And you want to give of your gifts and of your time and of your love. And you want to love. Love yourself. I'm loving this idea of we can only love with the capacity which we have to love ourselves. And last but not least, move that body. That always shakes up the energy. Move that body. We will see y'all next time on the Daily Huddle. Thank you, everybody. This was great. I loved it. As usual, got more out of it than I thought.
Stress less. You forgot that one.
No, I didn't. We just had a whole thing on it. Stress less. I thought we talked about that.
Yeah.
Relax.
Yeah.
Relax.
Take practice. That's my take.